Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider the news of the day. Inspector General of Police Tan Sri Abdul Hamid Badur has confirmed the arrest of 17 individuals following a raid on a condominium in Jalan Puchong at which drugs were found. However, he refused to elaborate on their identities, only revealing that those arrested consisted 11 men and 6 women, including a foreigner. Sharaad, this has been the biggest news of the day. Rumours flying around. What do you make of this story?
Well, Melissa, this would be an ordinary drug raid if not for the fact that the rumours included the arrest, possibly, of a member of the Selangor State Assembly. Now, that makes the story different from your regular crime stories. But I must say, Melissa, I'm of the opinion that politicians ought to have their private lives. I'm also of the opinion that there should be a distinction made between drug use and drug addiction, especially when it comes to questions of, fulfilling your function as a professional. But I'm not quite sure if the Malaysian public is quite ready to accept this of its politicians. What do you think?
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by you want to make a distinction between drug use and drug addiction. And you accept that politicians have their private lives. Now, I want to come back to this because we often talk about this on the show, the idea that, moral purity when it comes to, we expect a certain level of moral purity when it comes to our politicians. But I do have to make this a point that this falls under a crime. So this contravenes certain laws, yes?
Yes, but it's also a question of crimes and our criminal code and our norms with regard to crimes also evolving, right? So we need to see whether there was injury done to other people. There's some crimes which there might be no victims. People do things to themselves. They make personal choices. And I think that's, again, another conversation that we need to have in Malaysia. Whether we want the laws to evolve, and we know that in terms of drug use, there's already a call for decriminalization and so on and so forth. So is this particular event part of that larger story? Perhaps not, but I think it's an important thing to remember.
Okay, well, when we come back to the rumours that are circulating, I mean, there are multiple rumours circulating that this could have been internal sabotage simply because of the political nature of Malaysia. Now, last week we were talking about gutter politics, and I'm wondering whether should the rumours be true, in fact, if this falls under the same kind of category of gutter politics, which we so want to avoid seeing still in Malaysia Baru.
Well, okay, so people are putting 2 and 2 together. There's the Bersatu Party Congress coming up, elections there.
Elections happening, yes.
There's a suggestion that the individual from the State Assembly is from that particular party. And for those who perhaps chanced upon a list of individuals involved in that raid, even though it's not confirmed, would perhaps, because of their own political sense, be able to say, well, these individuals are aligned to one camp or another within that party. So all that, and in the absence of a clear narrative and information, people are going to speculate, and conspiracies come out of a vacuum in information.
And precisely because of this vacuum, I think the narratives are not quite aligned. So apparently the assemblyman named in the preliminary police investigation paper, he has denied that he was arrested, and he claims to have been at home at the time of the arrest. However, conflicting news reports I have on Malaysia Kini, quoting NST, News Straits Times press reporters who met him at his residence in Puchong, they said that, to quote him verbatim, but I can say that I was at the wrong place at the wrong time, said the assemblyman. Now, the Selangor Bersatu, alleged assemblyman denied he was arrested after being tested positive for drugs, and he claimed that he was at the condominium to attend a discussion and had done nothing illegal. So conflicting narratives there.
Well, yeah, and I guess to protect his own interests, he's going to have to put out a story that will suggest that he is, of course, not complicit in the crimes alleged at the particular case. But again, Melissa, it comes back to this whole idea about where have we advanced in terms of our politics? Is this just another expression of internal sabotage? I think that's probably the most interesting angle at the moment.
Yes. I definitely agree. All right, let's take a look at other news. Now, the families of 3 murder victims will meet Putrajaya's special committee to review the mandatory death sentence tomorrow. This comes ahead of a report on its findings expected sometime this month. Now, the family members are expected to voice their opposition against any move to replace the mandatory death sentence, and these include the family members of Deputy Public Prosecutor Kevin Moraes, cosmetics business owner Sosilawati Lawia, banker Stephen Wong, Jin Kui, and UUM graduate Chi Get Yap, as well as teenager Annie Kok Yin Cheng, who were both raped and murdered several years ago.
Well, Melissa, again, this report is interesting partly because of the way it casts the stakeholders in this conversation, including so-called liberal pro-abolition NGOs, and it goes on to say, government leaders who have ignored the victims. Now, the victims, of course, are the people who actually were murdered. These are people who are kith and kin, friends and family of those murdered. So they're not exactly the victims. I do think, though, Melissa, and this is why this story really grabs my attention, partly because my own personal feelings about the need for Malaysia to align itself to global standards when it comes to the death penalty, but the way in which emotive language and arguments are often marshalled by both sides of the debate. Well, let's, for instance, anytime there's a discussion about the abolition of the death penalty, somebody will mention a case of, say, the murder of a child,
right,
or the rape and murder of a child. These are very emotive hypotheticals that often are used to kind of sway the discussion. Now, I think it has to be remembered that the family and friends of those who are murdered have pain. I think
yes,
nobody can deny that, right?
Correct, yes. No one is denying the pain.
Yes, but the death penalty is a public policy issue that goes beyond the individuals who are involved or implicated.
No, I completely agree with that. I also think that this raises questions about what the death penalty actually achieves, right? Is it about revenge? Is it about justice? And, if you take a look at the global patterns, there seems to be a shift in attitudes globally towards the death penalty. And I think Malaysia is trying to be in line with this global shift, in fact.
So what we do know, Melissa, is about 72% of nations are either abolitionists in practice or in law. That's 72%. And in a recent, a show of hands at the UN around a moratorium on the death penalty, Malaysia for the first time joined in 2018. Now, it joined, so 139 countries out of 193 countries globally have joined in this moratorium, moving the world towards a death penalty-free world. And I think when you look at the countries that remain, that still have the death penalty, you see a general pattern. It's quite scary. The death penalty is deeply problematic on so many levels. But again, Melissa, we need that conversation.
Yeah.
Question is,
it's a difficult conversation to have without using emotive language. How do we all keep a level head and have this conversation without, jumping to each side, each corner of the ring, right?
Absolutely.
All right. And we're going to take a quick break and come back and take a look at the Electoral Reform Committee's interim report. That's coming up. But consider this. Stay tuned. Back to consider this. Melisa and Sharaad here with you today. Now, the Electoral Reform Committee, or the ERC, today presented its interim report to the Prime Minister, to Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. This report was based on 21 stakeholder engagement sessions, which were conducted over the 16 months since the ERC was set up in August of 2018. So the full report is expected by August. Now, to discuss this further, we have joining us on the line Thomas Fan, Chairperson of Bersih 2.0. Good evening, Thomas. Thank you for joining us today. Now, the interim report has been presented to government, but its contents has not been made available to the public. So, Thomas, how do we as a country begin to have a conversation about electoral reform without even knowing its contents?
Well, I think the report has just been handed in today. So I think we do hope that it will be made public, but we are not sure yet. But I don't see any reason why this report should not be made public, because the whole purpose is to get people discussing in conversation, so that they can provide feedback to the committee that is looking into this.
Thomas, maybe you can help us or help the public remember exactly the purpose of the Reform Committee, the different dimensions that it was tasked to look at in order for us to have a clear sense of what the conversation could be like.
Well, the committee was formed by Dr. Mahathir, basically to look into the overall review of anything to do with election. How can we improve our election so that it is up to world standards? I think this is basically on the background of how Brazil over the years have been demanding for free and fair elections. I think the opposition then, Pakatan Harapan, also rode along with that. And I think now that they are in power, they want to see how they can improve things, and that was why it was formed back in August last year.
Okay, so I understand in the interim report there are 15 areas that the ERC is looking into. So based on these 15, Thomas, which would you reckon, the most pressing concerns and why?
Yeah, there were 15 areas that the ERC was looking at, and in my mind, the most important area of reform that we need to look at is the reform of the election commission itself, or any election management body. Because without an independent and empowered election commission, all the other reform would come to nothing, because there will be no independent body to enforce any reform or to ensure that the playing field is level when it comes to election. So for me, number one is the reform of the EC, or election management body. The second thing that, in my view, very, very critical right now is to look at changing the electoral system from first past the post to something more proportional. The reason for that is that because why people engineer the election system is to deal with some inherent structural problem that exists in the country. I think one of the main concerns that we're having right now is the rise of identity politics, of ethnic racial politics. And I think the current election system does give incentive to politicians to use race and religion. So we want to see how we can tweak it and change it by incorporating a proportional representation system or a mixed system. And related to that is also delineation, because currently the boundaries are very badly drawn. Malapportionment is horrendous. So we have to somehow find a way to trigger redelineation of the election boundary even before G15. The third one in my list of importance is political financing. How political parties get their money. And because, as we know, the change in government this time was due to the scandal of 1MDB. And the excuse given was that money was needed to campaign to fund the party. But because there's no law governing that, we have a grand corruption that took place. So we want to look at how political parties fund themselves, and including public funding. Because if you don't give money openly, publicly to political party, they'll find it somewhere else, and oftentimes corruptly. So that, to me, are the three most important things.
Thomas, if you could help us, these are not very easy issues to resolve. I mean, neither the malapportionment issue nor the question of making it more democratic. I mean, could you walk us through one of the key, I think, perhaps barriers to change, which is the structure of the federation? And Sabah and Sarawak, will a more proportional system actually reduce their representation at the National Assembly? And could that be a reason for them not buying into a system such as a proportional system that, at whatever model that comes with it?
Yeah, I think Sri Rashid, the chairman of the ERC, has already stated publicly that they are not proposing to amalgamate Sabah and Sarawak together with Peninsula and make it one constituency, because that would disadvantage Sabah and Sarawak. But I think the proposal is that Sabah remain as one unit on its own, Sarawak one unit, but the Peninsula looking at a separate unit. So when the system that is actually being proposed by the ERC this time is lead PR. In other words, proportional representation, where the voter just need to cast their vote for the party, So Peninsula voters cast their vote for Party A or Party B or Party C, and according to the percentage of votes they receive in Peninsula, the seats will be assigned to them accordingly. That is, I think, what the ERC is looking at. So in that sense, no votes would be wasted.
Okay, so Thomas, for proportional representation then, do you expect anyone to oppose these changes?
In fact, I think ever since the Tan Sri Rashid mentioned about it, we have read that quite a number of opposition politicians and academics have voiced their concern and even outright opposition. But I think that is a very healthy sign, because I think it is getting people to start talking, discussing, and in conversation. I think the ERC is not like dogmatic, insisting that it must be this system or none at all. But I think it is a proposal, and that's why the feedback from the public, from the political party, is so important. We want to hear everybody's concern, so that we can come up with a system that all of us can own, and all of us can, together compete in a healthy way without destroying the country.
Right.
Thomas, in the last minute or so that we have, tell us how civil society, as you say, Bersih is instrumental in putting electoral reform on the national agenda. What role will it play from now till decisions are made to, in fact, raise awareness about the complexities of the choices before the Malaysian public?
Okay, I think maybe many are unaware that actually Bersih is part of the Electoral Reform Committee. And that was a surprise to us as well. When the committee was formed, we received an invitation to be part of that committee. And along with myself, our resource person, Dr. Wong Chin Huat, my executive director, Mr. Yap Sui Seng, and our Sarawak Vice Chairperson, Antio, is on the committee and actively involved. So a lot of the proposal that is coming out, including electoral system change, delineation, we have input into that.
All right.
So that is the input. So what we have been doing together with ARC and also on our own is to engage the public as well. So we were part of that 21 consultation around the country. But on our own also, we have conducted the consultation and workshops in Sabah, Sarawak, and Peninsula as well to introduce these reforms. So this will be something that we continue to do this year and after this.
Right. Well, we can look forward to continuing having these types of conversations right here on Consider This, electoral reform being a key focus of Malaysia Baru. All right. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Thomas. We'll be back with more on Consider This after these messages. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for staying with us on Consider This. I'm Melisa and Sharaad here, and here's what we want you to consider tonight. So yesterday, AirAsia boss Tan Sri Tony Fernandes said the time has come to shut down his Twitter account, saying that social media has become such an angry place. So we have a shot of his tweet, which reads, having closed Facebook, time is coming to shut down Twitter. Been such a fan, but too much negativity and falsehood and anger. It's been an amazing ride. Feel much better now, not on Facebook, and I'm sure will be even better without Twitter. Social media has become an angry place. So Sharaad, you are quite the prolific tweeter, I must say. Do you think Twitter is an angry place?
Well, I mean, Twitter is an expression of all kinds of emotions. Anger is one of them. It's a human emotion. I think it's legitimate. The question is whether you can get mired in a lot of negativity in your own particular echo chamber or your little segment of the Twitterverse. Right? So, and there are strategies to get out of it. I mean, you can block people who troll you. You can do all kinds of things. So the decision that Tony makes to remove himself is an interesting one.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure that that's the best way to move forward, because if somebody as influential as Tony is on Twitter, he can try, I mean, he's not going to be necessarily successful, but he can try to change the conversation. He can inject and push a much more positive, critical but positive agenda through social media if he wanted to, rather than just withdraw himself. I mean, that's just my personal opinion.
So that's your opinion, and I have to say, I somewhat disagree with you on that, because I think on Twitter, and I'm on Twitter and I tweet often, but I don't think that is a platform to change anybody's mind. I think that most people come to Twitter with a set worldview, and they are not ready to be convinced otherwise, no matter what facts you feed to them.
Well, that might be true of the vast majority, but you can also think of speaking to those who are much more open. And I think the public and the social and societies consist of people who are dogged in their opinion, people who are, as you say, set in their ways, but there are also people who are open, especially young people, who look to others to help them, remind them of facts, counter facts. I mean, there are all kinds of strategies. You have to keep faith. I mean, you could say this of all media, that people have their own opinions and they're not going to listen to other things. We don't close shop because we keep faith with the idea that reason and thinking and positive emotions can reshape conversations.
Right. No, in that respect, I stand correct. I agree with you in that respect. I don't think that a lot of minds will be changed, but I do think that Twitter has democratized the sharing of information, which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? So,
but we also know that social media has creatures we call influencers, who obviously are not like everybody else. Yes, these creatures have disproportionate sway or power to sway opinion, and that's why they're paid the big bucks. Unlike me, who doesn't get a cent from what I do on Twitter. But I think it's important to recognize that, yes, it's democratized it, but there also are the hierarchies that have come back into social media. Tony, of course, is a man of immense influence because of what he's created, and yeah, to remove himself means one less, perhaps, reasoned voice in the Twitter sphere. Okay,
what about the people who leave Twitter quietly versus those who leave Twitter or social media with some form of fanfare? What is that about?
Well, okay, so this that sounds like, we're going to launch into a critique of Tony's decision to go public with wanting to withdraw from something like Twitter. Now, perhaps, he's responding to the need for people to know why
he's gone quiet,
right? So he's providing information. It could be, and I think this would be the less generous explanation, is that many of us who are on Twitter, social media, are kind of attention-seeking individuals, right? There's something personality trait.
We say that with love, because we too are on Twitter seeking attention and love. I do have to say, though, I mean, you're absolutely right about a missed opportunity to have someone say positive things on Twitter, or use that platform to affect change, for instance. However, I think that should this be for the benefit of his mental health, then why not? Perhaps maybe not leave social media completely, but take some social media breaks. And if that works for your mental health, then so be it.
Yeah, more power to you, Tony.
More power to you, Tony. All right, that's all the time we have for this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. With me, Sharaad Kuttan. We will be back with you same time tomorrow night for another episode. Thank you for watching and good night.